Welcome back, explorers, to Whoosh Tales, the greatest adventure story channel for kids on the entire internet, bringing you brand new English stories for children every single week. This is episode 5, and if you have been with us since the very beginning, you will know that every adventure Finn Walker has faced so far has connected to the one before it and the one after it, like links in a chain that is building towards something none of them have been able to fully see yet. The edge of the world, deep space, the hidden city under the sea, the living forest, each one called by the compass, each one answered by a 10-year-old boy from a tiny village in the Scottish Highlands who had every reason to stay home and absolutely no ability to do so when something important needed him. But this episode is different from all the ones that came before it, because this time the adventure does not begin at the edge of something enormous and far away. This time it begins in Finn Walker's bedroom, at 2:17 in the morning, with a green gold light in the pocket of a gray hoodie. Finn woke without knowing why. One moment he was deeply asleep, and the next he was completely awake, the way you sometimes wake when something in the room has changed without making any sound at all. He lay still for a moment and listened to the dark wind against the stone walls of the cottage, ember breathing in the barn outside, slow and deep and steady as a tide. Nora's light snoring from the room next door. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. And then he saw it. The hoodie hanging on the chair beside his bed was glowing. Not brightly, not the blazing gold of the compass at full activation or the brilliant white of the space signal or the pale blue of the underwater passage. This was gentle and slow and deeply familiar, the exact green-gold color of the oldest tree at the center of the Greywood at the moment it exhaled, the color that Finn had felt rather than seen move outward through the entire root network of the forest when he pressed the compass into the hollow bark. It pulsed in the dark with the patient rhythm of a heartbeat, once every 2 seconds, steady and unhurried. The light of something that has decided the time has finally come and is simply waiting for the right person to notice it and reach into the pocket and find out what it has to say. Finn sat up. He reached into the hoodie pocket. His fingers found something he could not account for, smooth and flat and circular, warm in a way that had nothing to do with being inside a pocket and everything to do with being alive in whatever way non-living things can be alive when they have been in contact with something ancient enough to have passed some of that ancientness on. He drew it out into the dark of his bedroom and opened his palm and looked at it. It was a lens, no larger than a coin, made of something that was not glass and not crystal and not any material that had a common name in any language Finn knew, because the material it was made from had been grown rather than manufactured, shaped by 10,000 years of living forest rather than by human hands. It was perfectly clear in ordinary light, but it was not currently in ordinary light. It was in its own light, the green-gold pulse of the Greywood moving through it in slow waves, and in that light, it was not clear at all. It was a window looking into something. Finn held it up and looked through it. The ceiling of his bedroom disappeared. Through the lens, Finn was looking at something that overlaid the familiar dark plaster of his room, like a second image placed on top of the first, a map. Not a flat map drawn on paper the way maps normally are. A living map, rendered in green-gold light, three-dimensional and breathing, its features shifting and settling as he turned the lens slowly in his fingers. He could see Stonehaven Village from above, its streets and buildings rendered in delicate green-gold lines, the surrounding highland landscape spreading outward in every direction. He could see the rocky shore where the ocean passage had opened. He could see the tree line of the Greywood in the distance. He could see the road that wound down from the mountain into the valley. He could see his own cottage, a small bright point at the center of the village. And beneath the cottage, going straight down through the rock and soil of the highland earth in a passage too precise and too deliberate to be natural, a line, descending, pulsing with the same green-gold light as the lens, as if the passage below and the lens in his hand were parts of the same thing, which Finn was beginning to understand they were. At the bottom of the passage, at a depth that the map suggested was far below even the foundations of the oldest buildings in the village, a chamber. And in the chamber, a shape that made Finn sit completely still in the dark of his bedroom and stare for a very long time without breathing. A compass, larger than his grandfather's, larger than the navigator's, larger than any compass he had ever seen or imagined. The original, the first one, rendered in the green gold light of the map in such perfect and loving detail that he could see every line of its casing, every mark on its face, every hair of the needle pointing at something that was not north and not any direction on a standard compass rose, but something else entirely. Something that the map suggested was neither a place nor a direction, but a person. Pointing at Finn Walker. Had been pointing at him. The map implied with the particular eloquence of something that communicates in images rather than words, for the entirety of his 10-year-old life. He was out of bed with his boots on and his hoodie over his pajamas before he had consciously decided to move. He hesitated at the door of Nora's room. She would want to come. She would absolutely insist on coming and would be extremely specific about her feelings if he went without her. He knocked once and opened the door simultaneously in the manner of someone who has made a decision and is implementing it before the other party has technically had a chance to object. "Nora," he said. She was already sitting up. "I saw the light under the door," she said, reaching for her green jacket. "Give me 30 seconds. They crossed the village together in the deep quiet of 2 in the morning, the cottage windows all dark, the cobblestones slick with highland dew, the night sky above them so dense with stars that it seemed less like sky and more like a ceiling someone had worked very hard on. Ember met them at the garden gate, already awake, golden eyes bright, ember sparks drifting up from her scales in the cold air in a way that told Finn she had known this was coming long before he did. The three of them stood outside the cottage, and Finn held up the lens and showed Nora what was beneath them. Nora was quiet for a long time looking through it. Then she lowered the lens and looked at the ground beneath their feet, and then at Finn, and said, "Our grandfather built something under the village, and nobody knew." "It is beginning to seem that way," Finn said. Nora looked at the ground again. "Why?" she said. Finn thought about the letter from the extinct bird, the 5 words written in handwriting that slanted urgently to the right. He thought about the forest knowing his name. He thought about the compass that had guided him to every adventure and the navigator in space who had told him the compass points toward what you truly believe in, and the oldest tree in the world that had held something in trust until the right person came. He thought about all of it, and then he said, "I think because he knew someone was going to need it." Nora considered this. "He knew it was going to be you," she said. It was not a question. Finn looked at her. "I think so," he said. Nora put her green jacket on properly and straightened her braid and said, "Then we should probably go and get it." The entrance was exactly where the map said it would be. A stone in the floor of the cottage cellar that was slightly different from the stones around it. Not dramatically different, not obviously different, but different in the way things are different when they have been placed with intention in the middle of things that were simply there. A difference you would only notice if you were looking for it, or if you had a lens in your hand that turned ordinary stone-colored stone into green gold-lit stone at the location of a hidden passage. Finn pressed his palm against it the way he had pressed his palm against the bark of ancient trees and the black stone chains of the Ocean Guardian. With the particular quality of presence he was learning was the only key that genuinely mattered for anything important. The stone moved. The passage below was not rough or dark or frightening in the way underground passages in stories usually are. It was smooth-walled and gently lit by the same bioluminescent material that had lined the underwater passage to the hidden city, as if his grandfather had somehow known about that technology or had access to the same source that had produced it, which was a thought Finn filed carefully in the part of his mind where he kept things that were going to require very long conversations later. The walls were covered in the same layered inscription Finn had seen on the bark of the oldest tree in the Greywood, written in the same unknown ancient script, covering every centimeter from floor to ceiling. Thousands of years of accumulated writing in the most important underground room Finn had ever stood in, which was saying something considerable. At the center of the chamber the compass waited. It was everything the map had promised it would be, and more. Larger than anything that should reasonably be called a compass. A full meter across. Mounted on a plinth of the same ancient forest-grown material as the lens, its casing inscribed with the same script as the walls. Its needle was not metal. It was light, a single stable beam of warm amber light that did not waver and did not spin, and had clearly not wavered or spun for a very long time, pointing with absolute unwavering certainty at the place where Finn was standing. On the plinth beneath the compass, a letter, in the same urgently slanting handwriting as the 5 words on the bird-delivered note, but much longer this time. Finn picked it up with hands that were completely steady, which surprised him, and began to read. The letter was from his grandfather. It began, as all the most important letters do, not with explanation, but with truth. It said, "I have been waiting 17 years to write this, and I am still not sure I have the right words. So I will use the true ones instead and trust that you are old enough now to understand what truth costs and why it is always worth it." It said, "Everything you have faced so far was not chance, and it was not destiny, and it was not fate in the way people mean when they use that word to avoid taking responsibility for their choices. It was a path, built by people who understood that the world has edges and depths and heights and ancient living things within it that need tending, and that the tending cannot be done by the great and the powerful and the certain, because the great and powerful and certain are almost always wrong about the most important things." It said, "It must be done by the ordinary ones, the quiet ones, the ones who are afraid and go anyway, the ones who see something chained in the dark and cannot leave it there." It said, "I was one of those. And now you are. And the original compass does not point north. It never did. It points toward whatever in the world most needs exactly what you have. And what you have, my boy, is not power, and it is not magic, and it is not the dragon or the compass or the lens or any of the things that have come to you since the night the sky cracked open. What you have is the simple, extraordinary refusal to look away from something that needs you. That is rarer than any magic. That is what this compass was built to find." It ended, "There is more to come. There is always more. But you are ready. You have always been ready. You just needed enough adventures to understand what you already were. I love you. Go." Finn folded the letter and put it in the pocket of his gray hoodie where the lens had been. Nora had been reading over his shoulder, and when he looked at her there were 2 tears on her face, which she made absolutely no move to wipe away, which told him more clearly than words how much the letter had mattered to her too. Ember's golden eyes were visible at the top of the passage, watching them both from above with the patient, warm attention of a creature who already knew everything the letter contained and had simply been waiting for its people to catch up. The original compass needle moved for the first time. It shifted from pointing at Finn to pointing at something else, something through the stone walls of the chamber, something in a direction that the compass rose could not name because it was not a direction that had ever been named, a direction that meant away from the known and into the next necessary thing. Finn looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at the letter in his pocket. Then he looked up at Ember at the top of the passage and at Nora beside him. Her green jacket and her undone braid, and her 2 tears she was still not wiping away. "Ready," he said. It was not a question. It never really had been. And that is the lesson at the center of this adventure story for kids, explorers. The most important things in your life will not arrive with announcements or fanfare or obvious signs that say this is the one that matters. They will glow quietly in the dark in the pocket of an old hoodie and wait for you to notice. The gifts that genuinely belong to you are the ones that have been quietly pointing at you all along. Not because you are the most powerful or the most skilled or the most obvious choice, but because of the particular quality of who you are when no one is watching and nothing is easy, and the only reason to keep going is that something somewhere needs you to. That quality has a name. It is character. And unlike everything else, it cannot be given or taken away. It can only be built. One adventure at a time. One step forward at a time. One refusal to look away at a time. Hey explorers, if you made it all the way through the most personal and powerful Whoosh Tales adventure, yet then give this video the biggest thumbs up you have ever given anything and leave it there, because you have genuinely earned it today. Our comment question is the most important one we have asked yet. If you discovered that someone in your family had been secretly preparing something extraordinary specifically for you, what do you think it would be? Tell us below. Every single answer matters, and every single one gets read. Subscribe to Whoosh Tales right now and ring that notification bell so you never ever miss a single adventure story for kids. Because next week the original compass points Finn in a direction that has never been named. And what lies in that direction is something older than the forest, deeper than the ocean, further than space, and closer than his own heartbeat. We will see you next week, explorers. Hush! In the deepest part of that night, back in his bedroom with the letter on his bedside table and the lens in his palm, and Ember visible through the window curled in the barn, with one golden eye still open and watching the stars, Finn thought about his grandfather walking these same highland paths, carrying the knowledge of everything Finn had now experienced. making the choices that had led to every letter and every lens and every hollow in every ancient tree, building the path that Finn had been walking without knowing it was a path at all. He thought about what it meant to prepare something for someone you loved, knowing you would not be there when they finally found it. The patience of it, the faith of it, the particular courage of trusting that the person coming after you will be ready when the time comes, even though you cannot stay to make sure. He turned the lens over in his fingers in the dark and watched the green-gold light pulse through it in its slow, steady rhythm, and thought that perhaps this was the deepest kind of love there was. Not the love that stays, the love that prepares the way and trusts. And then he put the lens in his pocket and closed his eyes and slept better than he had slept since the very first night the sky cracked open over Stonehaven and a dragon fell into his garden and everything began.